Are you going next weekend?
Yeah, I am planning on this week. I am listed as an alternate to the state office.
Yeah, well, you'll get to vote, and I'm sure the alternates always get seated. Some people don't show.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Welcome. Those of you that are new, welcome. Those of you who have been here before, welcome back. Really appreciate you being here. And I wasn't sure how many would be here, and it looks like I scared off my colleagues from the house. Usually they're here, but they didn't show up. We have some former house members who are here. At any rate, I want to kind of get started. If my colleagues from the house had been here, I was going to have them start off with kind of a 5-minute blurb on what they were doing and what their committees were. I think last time they might have felt like they didn't get to talk as much as they would have liked, and that was my fault. But at any rate, I wanted to chat with you a little bit today and then answer your questions or get into discussing whatever is of interest to you. That's why these forums exist. Just for me to hear what you're interested in or concerned about or questions that you have. But I think part of it is also for you to hear about some of the things we're doing and some of the bills that, in particular, that I'm doing from the 8th District. So if you'll bear with me. First of all, I want to say that Councilmember Owens isn't here. She's usually here. Usually has me in better order than I am. But she's playing Grammy Owens this morning, and she's in St. Louis with our twin grandsons, and just I'm sure having a great time over there. But she sends her regards, and she'll be here next month, I think. So let's see. I saw Paul Lyons, Council Member Paul Lyons, who's also running for election. And let's see. Do we have any other? Sue Storm, who is on the Board of Education, and any other elected officials. Let me introduce 2 other people that are vital to my operation. Martha Kidd, who's here in the red jacket with the computer, and Vicki Thornton, who is back there in the corner. They are serving as, I even hesitate to call them interns because they're my right and left arms in the legislature. They keep me informed on things that I can't stay up with, and the assignments that I've actually asked them to follow up on. Vicki follows Education Committee. I'm on the Education Committee, but keeping up with bills and that sort of thing is not an easy thing to do when you have so many different things. And when you hear what I'm doing in Judiciary, you'll understand that. Vicki also is following the autism bill, which is near and dear to me. And so those are 2 of her main assignments, plus a bunch of other things that come up when she's in Topeka 2 days a week. Martha deals primarily with the Federal State Affairs Committee and also the DUI Commission that I've chaired now for the last 2 years. And we're trying to get it massaged around to something that will pass. But those are 2 critical assignments that Martha's been doing, in addition to a whole bunch of other things. This is Martha's 3rd year with me, and just does a great job. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you this morning. Let's talk a little bit about what this week's going to look like. This week is kind of unique in that it's turnaround week. Now, do y'all know what turnaround means? It means when all the bills from the Senate are supposed to be finished and they go over to the House. And all the bills that the House has been doing come over to the Senate because both houses have to consider all those bills. Now there are some things that don't get cut off. If they go through one of the exempt committees, and the three on the House are Federal and State Affairs, Appropriations, and Taxation. On the Senate side there are two. It's Ways and Means and Federal and State Affairs. If the bill goes through those committees, they're what we call blessed. And that means that they can be held over and they can be discussed later on. They aren't over with for the year. Now we're also in a year of, the bills will carry over. It's a carryover year. They don't just die this year if they don't get heard. So that if they don't get heard this year and then it comes up next year, they can be heard because it's in the middle of that 2-year election span. At the end of the 2-year election span, if a bill hasn't been heard, it dies, and then it would have to be refiled the following year. And that's because they only go as long as the members of the different houses are elected. So that's kind of just kind of a little lesson in how things work. But we are at turnaround week. What we do in turnaround week is at least 2 or 3 of those days we spend the entire time on the floor of the Senate or House hearing bills that have come out of the different committees so that they get concluded by the end of the week so that they can be sent to the other house. The committees have to stop their deliberations at least by noon on Tuesday, if they are morning committees especially. Now I can hear in Judiciary, because my committee meets 9:30 to 10:30, I can hear those on Monday and Tuesday. After that, I'm done until after turnaround, and then I can only deal with those bills that are blessed and those that come over from the House. So that's what we're dealing with. Let me real quickly go over, trying to think of the best order to do this. I want to share with you what the bills are that I've had in Senate Judiciary. Senate Judiciary has more bills than any other single committee on either side, and that includes Ways and Means, unless they adopt some of these others that are blessed. But I want to give you a flavor for what we deal with in Judiciary. And we've become more of a, this year we're going to get some that we haven't had in the past, and I don't know why, except maybe they painted a target on my back, but you'll see what some of them are. We've got one, and I'll read the bill number and then what it's about. Senate Bill 6, Criminal Procedure, Search Incident to an Arrest, a constitutional question. Senate Bill 7, Driving Under the Influence. That's one that is near and dear to me, and I'm going to get it blessed, and we'll have more discussion afterward because it's not finished yet. We've got more work to do on it. Senate Bill 9 is with the Code of Civil Procedure and updates and some technical amendments that the Kansas Judicial Council wants. Senate Bill 12 is a civil procedure bill that Senator Battle is proposed dealing with bankruptcy. Senate Bill 23 deals with juvenile jury trials, which was an interesting discussion, particularly over when we discussed it in a committee at the Kansas Judicial Council, and then they sent it over as to how we should handle juvenile jury trials. The question I've always had in that area, I've practiced law for 36 years, a lot of it was in juvenile and family law. I always wonder, what's a jury of your peers when you're 12 years old? So I'm not sure I feel crazy about jury trials with juveniles, but once we got into the juvenile offenders being treated much more like criminal defendants, the Supreme Court said that they need to be given the same rights with regard to jury trials as adults. Senate Bill 24, Reorganization of the Domestic Relations Statutes. Huge, huge project. Senate Bill 34, Driver's Licenses, Habitual Violators. This was one of the Journey bills. Senator Journey, now Judge Journey, wanted to see that habitual violators who lose their driver's licenses for a whole variety of reasons, that there's a problem and that they can't get anywhere that they need to go unless they have somebody else drive them. So he proposed that they be allowed to have a Class C driver's license for motorized bicycles. The only thing I raised about that is I can tell that he never drove in Saigon. There are a few of us that have, and believe me, if you want to see where all the motorized bicycles begin and end, go to Saigon. I guess it's Ho Chi Minh City now. Senate Bill 35, attorney-client privilege and work product protection, coinciding with the federal rule. Senate Bill 36, exemption from creditors for assets held in a qualified retirement plan and regular and Roth IRAs. Another rather complicated area, but dealing with things that may affect all of you that have retirement plans. Senate Bill 37, sentencing, payment of fines, employment of county and city prisoners. This was another journey bill. And what he wants to do, and there was really kind of an odd quirk. Some places were paying $5 a day to prisoners that didn't work, and others were paying $5 an hour, rather significant, and also an impact on what cities and counties might do. But we looked at that to try and find some kind of parity and equity, and also it applies to those that have fines and restitution that they can't pay because of indigence. They would get an offset of that for the work that they do for each hour. They just get an offset for $5 an hour off of your fine and other penalties. Senate Bill 38, children, permanency and priority of orders. Senate Bill 39, creating classification of aggravated sex offender, creating additional penalties and restrictions for sex offenders. That is a controversial bill that is really floating around right now. Senator Olson from Olathe proposed it. I have it in my committee, and I'm having to try to decide. There are a lot of people certainly that want to have this go through. It deals with how far away you can live from a school or churches or places where children are. Sounds like a no-brainer to a certain extent until you look at the complications that it creates. For instance, we do have children who are sex offenders and are on the sex offender registry. 12, 13, 14-year-olds who are on the registry. If this bill were to go through in its current form, those children could not live in group homes. If they went home to live with their parents, because where else would they go if they weren't in a group home? Their parents could not live within 2,000 feet of a school or a church or wherever because the child was living with them. People don't think about what I call the face on the people that we're dealing with. They just want to do away with the most heinous of the group, which are the sexual predators, most of whom should end up in Larned in the sexual predator unit. But we're not talking, people don't usually think in terms of a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old who had some kind of a sexual violation with a 5-year-old. That's just not who we think about when we think about a sexual predator or a sexual offender. So there's a lot more to it than most folks think. But, you know, if a politician starts talking about it, the first thing people say, oh, you're supporting those sex offenders. So, you know, it isn't all that easy. 44 is, this is a domestic relations marital property bill. I don't know how far that's going to go because it does change the way that marital property would be looked at in Kansas. Kansas is not a community property state, although we act like it a lot. Most of the time in divorce cases, it gets pretty close to that, but it's not technically a community property state. But this is one where they would be reviewing and looking at marital property as to what could be brought back in to the marital property status in terms of gifts that might be given to one side or the other. And that gets pretty complicated when you get into some of the divorce cases. Senate Bill 45, trust, certification of trust. That's another technical one that if you come and listen to those hearings, you will glaze over very quickly.
If you have insomnia, you're invited.
Certainly, just don't snore. Senate Bill 46, amending Civil Procedure Code, general provisions relating to electronic filing. Everything is going to electronic filing anymore. The courts are getting more and more toward that. And for some of us that are old dogs learning a new trick, that's a little bit daunting. But, I've got my 6-year-old grandsons who are coming up, and they'll probably be training me before too long. Senate Bill 47, Uniform Trust Code. Again, another one of those trust issues. It's modification of termination of non-charitable trusts and creditors' claims against the settlor. Sound exciting. Senate Bill 48, probate, payment of claims, filing of wills, order in which assets are appropriated. Senate Bill 52, concerning grandparents' custody of children. This is, I think, a pretty significant one from the standpoint that most people don't know what an interested party status is. That's a technical legal term. Interested party status is something that right now, under the current law, you have to request and have it granted by the court. What this bill would do is that it would give grandparents interested party status automatically. So they wouldn't have to apply for it, they would have it. Now the one little glitch that people don't understand in that area that I think will cause some consternation is that if you have a severance of parental rights, in other words, the court severs somebody's rights from their children, it also severs the rights of the entire side of the family. And the grandparents don't always understand that. So they don't have that right anymore, but they feel like they should. The only problem with that is, most of the time, those grandparents are going to reintroduce the severed parent back to the children, which is counter to what the court found in the best interest of the children. So that's a pretty significant bill, and that's we've had a hearing on that, and it was voted out to the floor. That will be going to the floor. Senate Bill 55, amending the crime of harassment by telecommunication devices. This extends it to texting. People that are harassing by texting. It's amazing how many electronic means people harass by nowadays. Senator Holland was the one who brought that up. Senate Bill 56, amending the crime of criminal sodomy. This is one that nobody wants to talk about. This is one of those everybody just kind of shrinks back. Why did you bring that up? But it is a bill that is under consideration, and it would remove the criminality of sodomy between two consenting adults of the same sex. And the reason for that is because the Supreme Court has said it's unconstitutional and brings the Kansas law under the constitutional advice by the courts. That is why it's there. And so it is a bill, but it'll cause a lot of consternation, I think, among a lot of people, but most people don't want to talk about it. Senate Bill 60, eliminating direct appeals to the Supreme Court for certain off-grid felonies. There are certain things, Jessica's Law, for instance, that go directly to an appeal to the Supreme Court. There are a lot of those. And so as a result, the Supreme Court says, we can't handle all the cases that we're supposed to be dealing with only 7 of us, and we have to hear everything in bank, in other words, all of them. So they want to refer a lot of those cases to the Court of Appeals to hear, and it may terminate there. There may not be anything that then comes on up to the Supreme Court, but the Court of Appeals has 13 members, and they hear cases in panels of 3. So they can address this in a much more expedient fashion at the appellate level. Senate Bill 62, assessment of court costs under the Kansas Standard Asset Seizure and Forfeiture Act. So that's, we're expanding the number of things that can be, where the fruits of the crime can be seized and forfeited. I've felt for a long time, and we've expanded that, but I think a lot of times people are in these businesses in order to get richer quicker. The best way to punish them is to take all of that away from them. Don't give them the fruit of their criminality. And what good does it do if they get all of that and they keep it and they go to jail for 2 or 3 years and they get out and then they've got it. You've all seen the movies where the guy's on the beach in Mexico or something, enjoying his $100,000 or whatever he got. So I think these forfeiture crimes are very definitely things that we need to go move in the direction of. And I'm sorry if this is taking too long, but I hope you're finding this interesting, because this is what my one committee is dealing with. This doesn't count all the other committees. This is just Judiciary and the Senate.
But you're not going to be able to hear all of those, so some of them are going to just hang over till next session. Is that correct?
Unfortunately, yes. This year, I have a reputation in the Senate. First of all, I meet 5 days a week. Not every committee does. Most of them don't meet on Fridays. I have 1 hour a day, but I've told people that every bill is important to somebody or it wouldn't be there. So I do try to hear as many bills as we possibly can. Sometimes they get short shrift because you just don't have enough time for everybody to talk about every bill as long as they would like to do. But I try to get them on the agenda so everybody's at least had their day in court and had a hearing. In addition to hearing bills, we have to work them. Hearing the bill is when we get input from the public. Working the bill is when the committee decides what they want to do with it as to whether to send it forward or not, or amend it. And so it actually, every bill takes up 2 spaces on the agenda. And just, you've heard the ones that I've been reading so far, and just calculate that 5 days a week, 1 hour a day through the session as to how many hours it takes to do some of these things. Okay, Senate Bill 63, amending the crime of sexual exploitation of a child. 73, amending criminal discovery statutes to prohibit the release of child pornography evidence in defense. What that means is you might have a trial where the defense counsel would want to subpoena all of the records, which would include all the pornographic pictures and all of the other things that deal with a child. Well, if it's child pornography, that child is re-victimized by having that picture then out in an environment where even the defense counsel who could show it to other people. So what this does is it limits. Doesn't deny the defense counsel the right to see what the evidence is, but it limits where you could see it. And it'd be in a secure facility where it's not going to be able to get out. And this was brought by the Attorney General. 74, civil procedure, forfeiture, electronic solicitation, sexual exploitation. When I first heard that, I said, well, what are you forfeiting? Well, basically what it is all the electronic equipment that you have, all the computers and all of the things that relate to it. That's also an Attorney General bill. 79, debt set-off, collection assessment fee, and that has to do with some court fees. 81, children and minors related to adoption, and that is an exempt bill, so that can be held over and still be heard this year. So I won't be hearing anything on that until after term limit. Judges and justices, employment of retirements. We have retired judges who can be hired, but they're very limited on how many hours and how much they can do, and they have to wait a certain period of time, plus they have to have applied for retired judge status and be able to work something like 5 months before they retire. This is lifting those restrictions on the retiring judges so that they can be used in taking care of cases and getting them moved. Let's see, children and minors, 84, children and minors related to permanency planning. 94, children and minors related to orders of temporary custody. Very serious issues that are in SRS. Then business entities, Senate Bill 96, business entities, this came out of the Secretary of State's office. Articles of incorporation and certificates of good standing, and this was a technical thing. Senate Bill 97, courts, court fees and costs, judicial branch surcharge. How many fees and surcharges can we add to court cases? Who pays those? The person who is wanting to go to court. And it is a problem on how expensive does it become, and does it become an impediment and a denial of access to the courts if you make the fees so high that nobody can afford to pay. So every time we get a new one of these, that becomes the question. 104, the Kansas Tort Claims Act, charitable health care providers. 105, interest on judgments. 106, Consumer Protection Act. 107, liability of medical expenses for persons in the custody of the law enforcement. That's my bill, and it came up. It's going to be carried over. I'm going to get it blessed because it's not ready for prime time yet. The problem is that we assess the cost of medical fees for prisoners who are put into jails. We assess it to 4 different entities: cities, counties, city law enforcement, and highway patrol. Highway patrol picks somebody up, puts them in jail, and they get sick. Highway patrol gets hit with the bill for paying their medical expenses if they don't have anything else that covers it. Well, the highway patrol does not have any kind of an allocation of funding to pick that up, so it becomes a problem. The county then pays the expenses, and we had a case come before the Claims Against the State that I also chair, but $185,000 bill was assessed by one of the counties against the highway patrol for those medical expenses. The highway patrol didn't have any allocation for $185,000, so they had to come to the Claims Against the State. So we had the county and the highway patrol come to the Claims Against the State, asking the state for a supplemental allocation of $185,000 so that the highway patrol could pay the county. So it's just confusing. So I thought we needed to have a bill that's going to try and tighten that up and take care of it.
How?
Well, here's the real issue. The counties and cities don't want an unfunded mandate, and they have to take these people into their jails. The issue has to do with the highway patrol, which is a state entity. So if the counties and cities want to get money from the state to pay that, their vehicle is the highway patrol. So we have to figure that one out. And there either has to be some allocation that deals specifically with health care. I think we ought to examine some way to get some sort of an insurance policy, some type of a deal that's out there where cities and counties or whoever is going to be paying it, or the state, could actually pay the premiums. And then if we get a sick prisoner that ends up needing to be cared for, we've got an insurance policy. But I don't know. I have to explore that in more detail.
If their family has health insurance, does it access that first?
Well, the problem there is
Oh yeah, adults don't, yeah.
adults don't necessarily get that. But if it's a child, that probably would work.
Yeah.
As a former insurance underwriter, I'm not so sure there would be an exemption coming along there, or some kind of an exclusion on a policy of somebody's.
Like you can't collect life insurance if you kill the guy, right?
That might be. But it may be that because there's a higher possibility of somebody being sick if they're incarcerated, because you're in close proximity to all kinds of things, you never, and it really is a higher possibility. So I don't know the answer, but we're sure we got the question in the bill.
I have a tiny bit of experience with this. Prisoners tend to have higher drug use as well, which can cause more serious diseases like kidney damage and that kind of thing. New York State, for example, puts those prisoners on a Medicaid program and covers it that way. I mean, it's kind of an accounting, more of an accounting issue than.
That may be a direction to go. Of course, then we get in, and I don't, it's just one of those things. I think that might be a reasonable thing to look at. The problem we run into then is where are we with our funding to Medicaid? And then when you look at what you weigh things against, several years ago I was general counsel at SRS, and we had an issue come up. We had somebody who needed a liver transplant. And he got his liver transplant at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. This is where it came in, so he went there. Kansas Medicaid paid for the liver transplant to the tune back then of $300,000. And it comes out of the same pool as all the foster care money and all those other things that deal with children and other senior issues. And there's only so much money in the pot. And then when you start getting those kind of things, now imagine what we'll hear if we have a a shortfall or a waiting list for the developmentally disabled, or we have other people that are accessing the Medicaid funding, and we're going to pay for a prisoner's health.
You've got to pay for it somehow.
We do, but people aren't going to be, that's the kind of thing we hear about. People say, well, you take care of our children first, you take care of our disabled first, and then you can take care of those sick prisoners. Well, if you've never been up to Lansing, go to the first floor of the Lansing Penitentiary and walk down the cell block. It's an eye-opening experience because it looks like a geriatric healthcare ward in a nursing home. And they're in their cells, and you just walk down there, and it looks the same, except that they've got iron bars. Really, those kind of pictorial things people think about. Anyway, Senate Bill 135, Kansas Racketeer, Influence, and Corrupt Organization Act. This is the Kansas RICO Act. 142, Kansas Adverse Medical Outcome Transparency Act. I don't know a lot about that yet, but it's going to be carried over. The 146, the abortion bill, late term and partial birth abortion. Senator Tadigan turned that in. That's the first abortion bill that we have coming out. And I don't know why they did it this year, but they're sending all the abortion bills to the Judiciary Committee. I think it has to do with the fact that Representative Kinzer is the chair of the Judiciary Committee on House side, and usually you marry up the two committees. Normally these are handled in Fed and State Affairs. 158, Full and Fair Non-Economic Damages Act. Actually, I canceled that here. You didn't have a proponent. I don't know how that happened. Usually you have somebody that's coming forward to advocate the bill. I did find out that this was, I think it was Senator Merrick's bill, but he wasn't an advocate for it, and I don't know who asked him to carry it. So anyway, I don't know whether we're going to do anything with that one. 159, Parole and Post-Release Supervision of Violent Offenders and Sex Offenders. 160, Collection of Child Support Payments. 164, this is kind of an interesting one. Plastic bulk merchandise containers, sales records, and civil penalties. You know those little plastic carriers that soda comes in when you go to the convenience store? They're about this big. We had a discussion the other day about this. They wanted us to pass a bill that would address that between the people that the suppliers would leave it in the convenience stores. The convenience stores would take little plastic containers and stack them up outside the back because they didn't want to build an additional room to store them in. Well, people come and steal them. And then they sell them to recyclers who crunch them up into pellets. So you can't identify them anymore. And there's no, there's no way to track them. So everybody said they're wanting us to step in the middle. And I said, you know, you want smaller government, and then you want us to figure that out. So I don't think that's going
Sounds like a problem for an entrepreneur.
Well, you know, it sounds like
Locking cages.
personal responsibility.
But, hey, Tim, not to cut you off, but that's a good example. So you mentioned that one of the other bills, that you're wondering why it goes to the Judiciary Committee. Can you say real quick, it seems to me like the Judiciary Committee ought to be handling bills that are related to the judiciary, but it sounds like you get involved in a lot of bills that aren't. How the heck do you get those kind of bills assigned to you?
See that target on my back?
I mean, is it just that the leadership decides I'm going to send it to this committee regardless of what?
Leadership decides where they go. They don't necessarily go to a, you know, we try to do that. I mean, medical bills should go to public health, and federal and state affairs is kind of a general catch-all. Obviously, anything that deals with financial, everything deals with financial in some way or another, but ways and means usually gets those. Judiciary just, I say this in all humility, I really do. I get bills done. I get them through, we work them, we move them, and sometimes when you do things like that, those are the people that get, look at yourselves, if you've got somebody that does everything and gets them done, who do you give them to? You give them more work. So I think that's what's happening with some of it, but I do think some of it has to do with, it came from judiciary, so it goes to judiciary. So anyway, sometimes it's the House of Origin that determines it. I understand we are going to have 6 more abortion bills that are going to be coming from the House. 165, licensure, here's another one. We do have another one. Licensure of abortion clinics. 175, videotaping of felony interrogations. I don't think that's going to go anywhere. Bless his heart, Senator Haley comes up with these things sometimes, and he had one that eventually got into law, and that was Scruffy's Law. You remember a few years ago, Scruffy was a little dog that, and Senator Haley kept coming back with it, kept coming back. We called it Haley's Comment. It just kept coming around, coming around, coming around. Finally, it got passed. This is the new Haley's Comment, videotaping of felony interrogations. And how involved can you get in videotaping? He wants to videotape every interrogation. Just picture that. How do you do that with all the cases that we have? If you videotape every single interrogation on every case, it's going to overload every police department that we have. So I don't think that's going to go anywhere.
Put it on a disk drive and leave it with the file?
Put it on a disk drive? That's fine, but you don't have interrogations always in the same little pristine room.
People can videotape on their phones.
I'm assuming law enforcement has cell phones.
No, they don't.
Not everyone. When you get into some of the small communities, you'll be amazed at how limited they are and what they do have. But, and we deal with this all the time between small and large communities and what their abilities are. And if you have a bill that applies to everybody, all of a sudden you find out those that just can't do it. We're dealing with that a lot with the court matters. Okay, I'm about done here. 176, making lawful presence in the United States a specific consideration in determining conditions of release for a person charged with a crime. This is the first of the bills I have that I think we're going to get more from the House, but this is the immigration bill. And I don't know how far we're going to go with it yet. Senator King brought this up, and we're going to have a hearing on it Monday morning. But it makes some sense. I mean, if you've got somebody that's in a prison, you should consider what their lawful presence is before you release them. I think that the immigration folks would like to come, and now you've got them. Let's, go ahead. That would be a reason for. Most of the time, you can't arrest somebody just for being an illegal alien. You have to wait till they commit a crime, and then you can arrest them. Well, if they're incarcerated, then this would do it. So we'll see what that does. A couple of Senate concurrent resolutions. And I will tell you that I am very, very, very reluctant on this first one to do anything with it. This has to do with the selection of justices of the Kansas Supreme Court and the Kansas Court of Appeals. And what the effort is that what the bill says, or the resolution says, is that they want the governor to appoint, and that there be confirmation by both houses, the House and the Senate. If you do that, you are going to totally destroy anything that we have with any kind of system we have now, in my opinion. We have a selection panel that is made up of people that look at all of the applicants. They nominate 3 to the governor. The governor then interviews them and chooses one, and then it's confirmed by the Senate. If you put it into both houses, it will never get a confirmation by one of those 2 houses. Somebody will stop it until you get exactly the person they want to have there for political reasons. And I do not support that in a judiciary. I never have, never will.
Good for you.
So I think that we need to, I rarely do this, rarely, because because I do hear bills, I try and get them through. I think I'm going to use the power of the chair on this one, and it's not going to go anywhere.
So I've understood the current system is much like the federal system then, where they're approved by the Senate.
Do what?
Our appointees are approved by the Senate.
There's a confirmation. Yeah.
Confirmation, like the federal system. Okay.
So I don't have a problem with confirmation by one.
Okay.
I do have, both would be, we confirm a lot of things in the Senate now. You'll think I chair everything, but I chair the confirmation, or I'm on the confirmation committee, and we lost the chair of it. It was the Attorney General, so I don't know what they're going to do, but there's a possibility they'll end up with that. But so anyway, that's one that I think is a very dangerous precedent for us to have. It's exempt and it'll carry over, and we'll see where that goes, but I'm not going to be supporting it at all. The second one is an amendment to the Constitution concerning health care. And this is the anti-Obama health care one, and we'll have to see how that comes out. I just don't know where that's going to go. That's exempt as well, and we'll just have to see what happens and what the debate is with it. Senate resolutions, I had one where I was asked by some constituents in my constituency to do something about at least urging the country of Turkey to acknowledge the right of the Christians, particularly the Eastern Orthodox, Greek Orthodox folks, to their right to exist and their right to religious freedom in Turkey. And so we did a resolution on that. It was kind of a neat deal. But let's see. Okay. Save the best to last. Do y'all know what EROs are? Executive Reorganization Orders.
Yep.
The governor just came out with a whole bunch of them. And they are to reorganize, and he can pass an order. He makes an order that if you don't do anything with it, it goes into effect. And it's based upon reorganization of government. There are two that I think are in real trouble. One is the Arts Commission. He wanted to eliminate the Arts Commission. He has heard all across the state about, don't do that. I think the ERO on the Arts Commission is going to be, I know there's a resolution on that, and I don't think it will make it, so I think the Arts Commission will stay. The other one is in my committee, and it has to do with abolishing the parole board and establishing the prisoner review board within the Department of Corrections. We've had 2 days of hearings, pros and cons, and I think we're going to do a resolution. Now, how important is that? Yesterday I was meeting with a judge in my office, and my secretary came to the door, and bless her heart, she takes real good care of me. I'm surrounded by these ladies who take really good care of me. So she came up and she knocked on the door. She says, "I'm sorry to bother you, Senator, but I think there's somebody out here you need to talk to." I said, "Who is it?" "It's the governor." So I excused myself with the judge. He stepped out, and the governor stepped in, and we had a little chat about this ERO, and he wanted to know how we could reach some compromise, because he knew that it probably wasn't going to work out too well. His big concern is the cost of the parole board, which is about $500,000 a year. What isn't there is the hidden cost of the substitution that he wants to make. And the big thing that the committee, and it's almost the entire committee, is concerned about has to do with the fox guarding the hen house syndrome. If you put the parole board as a parole review board under the Secretary of Corrections, who reports directly to the governor, who's appointed by the governor and serves at the pleasure of the governor, and if the big issue is money, and all of a sudden you need to cut some more out of the Department of Corrections as well as other places, Mr. Secretary, turn 50 more loose. I don't think that's the way that we want to determine who's in those slots in the prisons. So that's a big concern that people have about, well, what are we doing here? Plus, who's going to do the work? We just swept 2,000 jobs out of state government. The government did. Any vacant positions were swept. So they're not going to be refilled. That means everybody who's left is going to do all the work, even the work that was supposed to have been filled by some of those people that hadn't been. And by the way, some of those people that were not filled, those positions that weren't filled, there's a thing in government called shrinkage. Shrinkage is what you do. You don't fill a position for a little while so you can make up some money for a short term, but it doesn't mean the job isn't important. It just means that's the way you're going to kind of balance your budget out. So we've lost the 2,000 jobs, so we asked the Secretary of Corrections, how are you going to do this? He said, well, I think senior management can handle it. I would have liked to have had senior management sitting in back of him in the hearing to see their faces when they found out that they were going to be working from 2 to 4 in the morning. Because I don't know when they're going to work and do 500 jobs, or 500 prisoners are under the old system that need to be reviewed by the parole board now. All of the revocations that come back in that the parole board has to look at and whether they're going to be revoked and brought back into the system have to be reviewed. So you get all of that, and they're going to add that to senior staff. So there's some real serious problems, and I think probably one compromise the governor's interested in is maybe making the paying parole board per diem and expenses instead of salary. That may be an option, provided you can get people to work for that, because it's almost a full-time job, or it is a full-time job. Anyway, that's the latest thing that we have to try to decide. Okay, I've done a lot of talking and a lot more than I intended to do, and I apologize for that, but I thought it might be interesting for you to hear. This is one committee. These are one batch of things that we are dealing with. Now, let me just turn it over to questions and see what questions you have. Yes, ma'am.
At the beginning, you said something about an office and building order that come out when you were running through bills. I mean, is this something we're working on, but exactly is it?
The autism bill is not my committee,
Okay.
but it's my bill.
Okay.
I have 2 grandsons who are on the autism spectrum. They're with Grammy today. They're doing very well. They go to kindergarten, they put their little backpacks on, and they walk down the street, and they're doing great, and they've got some help with some therapists that help them out. But they got ABA therapy when they were 3 years old. There is a window of time for these children. If you miss the window, then they are going to have difficulties their entire life because they didn't get that connection in that window. And it's usually between the ages of 3 and 8. So what we're trying to do right now, last year we got a bill passed in Kansas. But it has to do with, it requires a test track. And the test track only applies to the state program. And it only applies to those people that are covered by the state program, and that's only 120 kids on the autism spectrum. So Missouri, at the same time, passed a bill that is much more comprehensive and has a much higher level of mandate. But it is a mandate. It's an insurance mandate. It requires the insurance companies to cover it. To give you an example, Children's Mercy Hospital now will take care of Missouri kids under their plan. They're not treating any Kansas kids because they don't have the insurance for it, and it's an expensive process. So what this bill is that we're trying to do is at least bring Kansas in parity with Missouri and cut off having to do this test track, which takes a year, and then it takes another year before it goes into effect, if in fact they mandate it, before it ever gets there. So it'd be 2014. I'm not concerned about my grandkids. They live in Missouri. I'm concerned about all the kids like them that live in Kansas. And there are about 7,000 of them. And I think that we need to have a bill in Kansas that's at least as good as Missouri has to take care of these kids that are on the autism spectrum.
What's the test track, Tim?
Test track is for 1 year. You deal with the program for the state program,
Is that
state insurance.
children's health insurance,
Yeah, it's with Blue Cross Blue Shield.
yeah.
They're mandated to do it for a year and just see how it works. And if after that year, the legislature votes to go ahead forward with it, then it goes into effect July 1 the following year, 2013. That's every mandate, every insurance mandate in Kansas has to go through that kind of a process. So that's where we are with the autism.
Do you have a bill number for that just to make it a little easier to follow on?
What is the bill number? It just passed out. Senator Kegro had it in his committee on children on the House side. Unfortunately, Senator Kegro had a stroke on the floor of the House the other day. And it's a minor stroke. I understand he's doing well, but he's in Stormont Vale Hospital, and they're running a bunch of tests on him. But because of that, obviously, he couldn't run his committee, and so they transferred the autism bill to the Financial Institutions and Insurance Committee, which is Clark Schultz. That's where it was last year with the bill we did get passed. And it will then feed over into Ruth Teichman's bill, or Ruth Teichman's committee on the Senate side if they pass it out of the House side. But it's on the House side right now. And that's why I don't know the number. It's I want to say it's 2046, but I'm not sure. It's something like that. Yes, sir.
This is kind of a question and part of a brainstorm idea that was got, but are the prisoners required to work, yes or no? And if they are required and we pay them, why can't we start taking money out of their paychecks for the Medicare plan like they do for the rest of us people not in jail?
Prisoners are not required to work. You can't force them to work. Most of them, at least in the prison setting, if they earn the right to have a job, they have to earn the right to do that. And I think there are offsets that are already there for the money that they make in the prison industries and that sort of thing. Up in Lansing, they've got 2 or 3 organizations that actually go on site, and they have prison industries that work there. So they do some of that already, but we could not mandate that prisoners work. Now, I've never been in that situation, but I can't imagine sitting around all day not having anything to do. Some of them, maybe that's how they lived outside, except for
They're working on the defense strategies and their appeals with better equipment than what real people have. That's what they don't have time to work because they'll find these crappy claims that they've been mistreated. Their soup isn't warm enough or something.
It is amazing the letters that we get. I should sometime bring some of the letters I get from prisoners about things that they're upset about.
The ones who are sick may be too sick to work as well.
Well, that's true. They are.
That first
The ones
floor
I was
one.
talking about. Yes, ma'am.
I realize this is issues probably that you're not dealing with on your committee, but I'm very interested in education. And I'm wondering two things I'd really like to ask you about. One, anything about SB 19? Is that going to go forward? Do you have any idea? This is the bill to roll capers into the base state aid so that LOBs can gather more dollars for schools that way. I'm very interested in our schools.
Vicki, did that pass out of the committee the other day?
Final action has not been taken on that yet. It was heard. The school districts did all show up. It was supported by all the school districts, including our western ones. In addition to that, last week another bill was heard in order to increase the general fund by a small amount, which would allow only for the purpose of increasing LODs. So the school districts, you see them working together in several ways, correct me if I'm wrong, to try, they're making several runs at trying to increase the general fund for the purposes of LOD increasing. And there's several bills out there that are working toward that end.
Will they be able to equalize that?
Yes, every one of those bills so far had equalization in them. So there's one that's going to be 21, the one that you're talking about will increase, will have a fiscal note of 21.6 million on it. So that's kind of what is causing some concern. And the one that was heard this week has a fiscal note of only 4 million on it. So
Senator Brattle is one of the ones that's really very big on that. He and I serve on the education committee, and I kind of defer to him because he's an expert in that area. I can tell you that anything that comes out with no equalization is probably doomed,
Right.
either there or in the courts.
Well, and a couple of them have come out that don't have equalization, like the local activities budget.
Right. Can I ask you about one other thing?
Sure.
Sometimes I'm coming to feel like this is almost being a Harry Potter film and bringing out the name Voldemort. But the Trans-Canada Pipeline is coming through Kansas, and we're the only state that is not collecting taxes on this. And our schools are hurting, I mean really hurting. Shawnee Mission East lost a coach in every single sport last year. We lost teachers, we're going to lose many more teachers this year. Their revenues are in the billions per year, and I don't understand why we're not taxing it. Why we do have sources of revenue, and we're not saying it even. And it's Coke Industries.
Of course.
We also have the fair fare subsidy that is given to Wichita. I think we're not talking about something that's sitting right in the room.
I do
How
not
do we
know.
support you?
I do not know the answer to the one about the pipeline because it really hasn't come out far enough that I would get exposed to it too
I
much.
had a couple of articles that
But-
just came out yesterday.
We will certainly look at that. Martha, can you make a note about that? And we'll look at that, but
They're paying taxes in every state around us but us.
and I think it's fair to ask that. If the other states are doing it, and we're looking for, we're literally looking for change in the couch these days, So I think that's a very valid question, and we'll certainly look into that, and I'll try and find out. I'm sure somebody must be looking at it. If they're not looking at it, I'll find out why we're not. As far as the Wichita, I would love for us someday to have Johnson County and Sedgwick County get together on something, and we might actually be able to push some urban issues through better than we are able to now. But Johnson County is not together on many issues, and Wichita is not together on many issues. And until those urban areas actually get their act together and kind of find a way that is really beneficial to the urban areas, we're going to continue to be outnumbered by the rural areas. Not that we don't need to take care of the rural areas. And my wife comes from Sharon, Kansas. Sharon, Kansas has about 250 people in it now, and the biggest thing they have in town is the sign outside of town that says Home of Martina McBride. There are towns that are now being referred to in western Kansas and some in central Kansas as frontier towns.
About 30 counties.
It is amazing. And the trying to attract businesses, I think I told you all that statistic before about Oak Park Mall makes more sales tax money in a year than 56 counties in Kansas together. So until we can get something done, those folks out there that are representing those people are genuinely representing their folks, and I can't fault them for that. But that gets back to your LOB question and a lot of those other things, why they balk at that, because they just don't want to have, it's more about the gap and taking care of their kids. Anyway, it's Bob.
Maybe if they heard enough, they'd have fewer counties out there.
Well, that is something that has been discussed a lot more. I brought up, actually I had a map prepared 8 years ago, and it was, everybody thought I was crazy. It had 36 counties. Now, Senator Steiniger glommed onto that and got it put in the paper and called it his, but what can I say?
You're probably fortunate that he did that.
Well, except that we are now in a position where people are actually starting to talk about it, and back then you couldn't even say consolidation. When I first started with that, people told me, they said, don't say that word. Just say the C word, and everybody will know what you mean. So now we're talking a lot more about consolidation, not only about counties, but also about operations, like for instance, Manhattan and Riley County consolidated their police departments and law enforcement. Wyandotte County consolidated with Kansas City, Kansas. Greeley and Tribune have consolidated their operations. And so it's starting to happen. It's just a slow process, and it has to be bottom up. It can't be dictated top down.
You mentioned that SOP, I think it was 44 or something like that, about electronic filing. I was wondering what that was about.
it's 46, amending Civil Procedure Code general provisions related to electronic filing. It's a technical amendment that allows for courts and the Court of Appeals in particular to have the electronic filing of documents instead of having to be, physical. It really cuts down on the amount of filing space and storage space for the old traditional files.
Would this involve MERS,
Would this involve who?
MERS, Mortgage Electronic Registration System?
It might.
Kansas is a judicial state, so any foreclosure would have to go through a judge. Of course, that's been bypassed by, voters. So does this?
I don't think there's anything that's excluded in anything that's filed in the courts. So that might be included. You might want to check on that. But it hasn't happened yet. It's still in bill form. And it was chaired by Supreme Court Justice Marla Lukert. She was the chair of the Electronic Filing Committee.
The bill you mentioned about electronic harassment, is that related at all, can fold into the cyberbullying thing in schools?
It's related in topic. I'm trying to think of, it's Tom Holland's bill. And I'm trying to think if he related to that. I think it does include bullying. It's bullying and sexual harassment by texting. It's the
Just texting, not
sexting bill.
Yeah.
I have a question about the licensure of abortion clinics. Does that also include the crisis pregnancy centers?
I think so. Yes.
Well, I'd like to compel on what this lady said over here about the influence of Cook Industries, the Americans for Prosperity, the Cato Institute, all these things. I just wonder where the transparency is in their influence on our government, our state government.
Include the Kansas Policy Institute in that.
I don't know about transparency. You kind of threw me with that one.
Well, Chamber of Commerce, for
You can see,
example,
well,
they hang out
yeah, they
at
do,
the
but
Cook's kitchen table, right?
you know something that was really interesting that somebody brought out here just recently. The governor and the Kansas Chamber really went after some of the people that were running for office if they voted for the 1-cent sales tax. Now look who's supporting it. They don't want to do away with it. Neither the chamber nor the governor. I think that's kind of an interesting switch. Now, back to your transparency question about the influence. I have to say that if you look at the people that are being appointed to the appointed positions across the state government, I'm very concerned about where those are. And I'm just being really candid. I don't poll who else here, and there may be people who disagree with me, and if you do, that's fine. But let me use as an example something I'm very, very familiar with, and that's SRS. We brought in a guy who probably has some good experience out of Florida to be the new secretary of SRS, but he didn't have any experience in running a department, but he had experience within the department. So I didn't have any real problem with that. But immediately after he got here, he was told who his general counsel was going to be. Well, it's a guy named Corkins. Now, where does Corkins come from? They also hired a guy to be the chief of staff. There was not a chief of staff position before. $100,000 a year. His brother was the chief of staff or whatever for Congressman TR. And he is now the chief of staff for SRS. Neither one of those men have one iota of experience in SRS. They fired John Badger, who was the general counsel, who had 37 years of experience with SRS, was my deputy when I was general counsel at SRS, and somebody that has more institutional knowledge about social and rehabilitation services than anybody else I know. That makes no sense to me. It's all political. If you want to go and look at who was hired to be the Juvenile Justice Authority, now, I don't know the man personally, and he's a nice guy. I've met him. But our juvenile justice, they got rid of the guy that, Russ Jennings, who had probably done more for juvenile justice in this state than anybody had for the last 50 years. He left. He was willing to stay. But they put in another guy who has no experience in juvenile justice. He at one time had served as a correctional officer. And who they hire as his chief counsel? Comes right out of American Prosperity.
Remember
All
the movie
of
The
these-
Hunt for Red October? And the political officers that stood over the shoulders of everybody who was trying to do their job?
Sure.
Who ended up dead?
Well, what has happened is, and I understand this because I've been in and out of it, a new governor, a new administration wants to have their own team. I understand that. But I think you need to be very, very careful that you don't just do it for that reason. You need to find people that qualify. But what we're seeing is all across the board, we've got this same kind of a thought about, and I will tell you, the issue is this. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but this is where it is. This is my opinion. Just 10 minutes. It is money against people, like it always has been. And right now, the money is so hard to find. We have got to do something about the fact that we're $550 million short. We've got to do something about, the not getting ourselves deeper into the hole. I understand, I've talked to the governor, and I understand his position is that. He feels that by bringing people in that are anti-tax into these positions, that's the way he's going to cut those expenses in those different departments. And he's brought people in that's what they think and they believe. I don't have a problem if they want to do that up to a point, but you cannot eliminate. Let me use this as an example. How many of you have ever been to KNI, Kansas Neurological Institute? It doesn't take very long going to that institute before you realize that the people that are there cannot go home. That is their home. KNI is on the block to be sold. And what do you do with the people that are there? They have to find a place for them. Well, where they're talking about sending the most profoundly disabled is sending them to Parsons. Parsons does not have enough facility to deal with all of the people they would have to take out of KNI to put there. They just took a few legislators out to KNI and let them see that facility. I was appointed by the judge here to represent 10 people that are residents of KNI. I'd never been there before then, although I had been general counsel at SRS. But I have been to Parsons, I have been to Winfield, and I have been in those facilities. And just to give you a vignette, I don't mean to bore you, but when I went into the facility at KNI to meet my 10 clients, to explain to them their legal rights, they were all adult women, 10 adult women. They had the mental acuity on that ward of 0 to 6 months. 0 to 6 months. When I went into the ward, the nurse kind of, she said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I need to explain to my clients their legal rights." She said, "Okay, counsel, come with me." We went in, she said, "Now remember, these are adult women." She said, "By the way, they have adult women hormones. And you're a man, and they don't see men very often." I said, "Look, oh, okay." Well, I went in there, and we were standing there talking, and I gave her a list of the people I needed to see. All of a sudden, this lady had attached herself with her teeth, and she would not let go. So the nurse is standing on the other side, and she said, "Okay, that's one of yours. Explain to her rights." So I explained her rights to her, and then the nurse said, "Okay, you need to let go now." So she let go. These are women that had no family. They had no place to go. And yet we're talking about closing institutions. I understand about maybe consolidating and then maybe selling off some parts of it because it's right next to the Kansas State, or to the Veterans Administration Hospital, but we tried to sell the Topeka State Hospital, and that resulted in some issues. So we just can't do things just because we're trying to save money. We've got to be reasonable about the other side of it. And that's where I'm frustrated in the legislature, because we've got too many people there who are not interested in that other side. And a lot of the people we're getting into these positions that you asked about are people that are there for one reason only, and that is to cut expenses. And the way you cut expenses to them is to cut programs. But they don't understand the program. If you don't understand the program, how can you reasonably and ethically cut the expenses? That's the problem right now. I don't care about cutting expenses. We need to find the money. And then I'll get back on I won't get on it today because you've heard me talk about it before, about the sales tax exemptions that we have in the state. Anyway, okay, you get me on a rant and I just...
Before my question, I just want to talk a little bit about what you said about the changes at SRS. I've also heard that they let go 2 enforcement attorneys, that are there to help collect child support. So in other words, basically what you're saying is that we've hired somebody to do Bob Corcoran's job because he's not qualified, and we let people go, and we're going to make sure that children got the support they deserve.
Well, the Child Support Enforcement, CSE, is a portion of SRS. And I haven't heard about the 2 people. There are a lot of people around the state who are in CSE that are either contracted to do that or they're in Topeka. And I hadn't heard that yet, but it makes sense. I mean, one of the things that they're doing is they're paring down more and more positions. There are also the counties through the county programs, the 4D programs and whatnot that they're collecting. So I don't know where that fits, but...
But I mean, I could use that as an analogy. I mean,
yeah.
Someone's got 1,600 cases, now has 2,200. It's not likely a lot of them are going to get done. My question is, first, thanks to the Senate Education Committee for putting money in for special education. That bill's in conference committee, kind of at a standoff. Do you have any inkling as to what might happen?
Well, I'm not on the conference committee, but John Brattle is. And the chairman of the committee, Gene Schodorf, is, and I think they both are very supportive of the special ed, and I don't think they're interested at all in seeing that get cut. It may be a hard, long conference committee in negotiating that settlement, but I don't think they're going to let that go. I would be surprised if they did.
Tim, one of the things you haven't mentioned when we went through the list of bills, I saw in the paper this morning about a proposal, maybe it's coming through the House, I don't know where it's coming from, dealing with a constitutional amendment to prohibit the judiciary from being ruling, I guess, on education funding. You know what I'm talking about? Is that going to go through your committee?
If it's in the Judiciary Committee over there, it'll be in my committee over here when it gets here.
Okay.
That's the Montoy case. There are so many people that can't let go of the Montoy case. They don't like the results, and they still blame the courts. They're still activist judges for doing it, and they did all this damage to us in education. Well, if you read that case and you look at the way the Court of Appeals ruled on that, they ruled that the lower court had a basis for making that decision. And people don't understand, the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals do not change the facts. And they don't override a factual determination if the court has a legitimate basis for making that, just because they might personally disagree. That's what happened in Montoy. Montoy, the district court judge, Judge Bullock, made the ruling. And when he did that, he made a lot of people really annoyed because it required the state to pay for money. That got into the legislature, and they said, we're the only ones by constitutional mandate who can appropriate money. And they accused the courts then of appropriation of money by requiring that they be paid. The issue gets back to what we're dealing with now. We just had breakfast with a young intern who's been assigned this job. We have to find out what's the definition of suitability for education, because that's the term in the Constitution. And so that's all wrapped up in that. But there is a group that's wanting to say, court, you can't tell us how much to spend, even though the Constitution says you have to fund suitable education. Well, in order to get there, you have to find suitable education. That's what they're looking at now. There are a couple of subcommittees that are looking at how you define it.
Are there educators on those committees?
Yes. So that's all wrong. I don't know whether they're going to resolve that this year or not, but I think they want to. And if it comes over, again, you know, what's an education bill? Well, it's really judicial. It's really a judiciary bill because it's in the courts. And we will look at it. Gene Chodorf is on my committee in judiciary. John Brattle is on my committee in judiciary. So I have a very good committee. It's made up of mostly really smart, long-term people that have been there, and they are also, several of them are committee chairs in their own rights.
Mike Thomas, Senator Chodorf is chair.
Senator Chodorf is chair of education. Senator Brattle is the vice president of the Senate and vice chair of education and vice chair of the appropriation or the Ways and Means Committee. You know, it's a good committee. Gene?
Yeah, thank you. Excuse me, first of all, thank you for having this forum. Unfortunately, I'm kind of disappointed that our representatives that are part of the area did not show, because there are a lot of questions that I have pertaining to their votes and so on, and starting with the House rules that were passed, which give basically effective appropriations control to one man, in my opinion. At least 12 people if you talk about the majority on the Appropriations Committee, but since those people are dependent upon their appointments to the Speaker of the House, I feel like it really gives effective control to one man, and also the secret meeting provision, which I guess the Senate already had as an option. But anyway, those are my concerns there. But I think the things that Paul touched on are these constitutional amendments. There's about 3 of them here. One of them has to do with striking the phrase, shall make suitable provision to finance of the educational interests of the state, and changes that in a way that provide for the equitable distribution of public school funds in a manner and amount as may be determined by the legislature. Then coupled with that is the other constitutional amendment, which deals with the executive and judicial branches shall have no authority to direct the legislative branch to make any appropriations of money, direct or to redirect or limit in any fashion an appropriation already made by law. So basically what you're doing is taking the courts, first of all you're redefining the definition of suitable provision, then you're taking the courts out of any authority. And there's a third constitutional amendment that's probably not going to happen, but it's patterned after the kind of disastrous situation in California. It requires 2/3 of the legislature to pass any tax increases whatsoever. So basically, that's what got California into so much trouble and put them into such a deficit situation. So there's a lot of constitutional amendments that are floating around out there which could be on the ballot, and then all it takes is a simple majority to pass them, even though it takes a 2/3 majority of both houses to actually get them on the ballot. So those are all concerns to me. I don't know what your thoughts on any of those are, but that's just my thoughts on it.
Well, I appreciate you clarifying some of those. You're absolutely right. Those are the things that are there. But if you listen to what we've been talking about this morning, that's the direction things have gone. And you have, the speaker was one of the leaders in the objections to the Montoy case. He was over in the Supreme Court, and there were all kinds of, he was visibly angry most of the time about the Montoy case. So he is in a position, now it's not unusual to have a speaker have that much power, and he has directed things the way he wants to have them directed. He appoints the people who has that power, and so that's the nature of the system. There are counterbalances to that. I mean, you have to have enough votes on both sides, and I will tell you, the Senate this year is the Senate is the Dutch boy with the finger in the dike.
You always have been.
And that's part of our function, I think. But it's that those kind of things are coming out of the House, and it's because it's taken this long for them to get to the point where they have enough votes in their body to really get out there to strike back at Montoy. This all goes back to Montoy and having the court tell the Senate they have to abide by the Constitution. Well, you know, that's. I did want to make one comment. Somebody said something about the Cato Institute. I will tell you, not everything is bad that comes out of there. I carry this in my pocket all the time. My wife says, "Do you have to take the Constitution to the movies?" I just carry it around. But this came from the Cato Institute. And that's a good book. But this is the Constitution. And
That's not their version, right?
But it has a pretty good preface in it, written by a scholar at the Cato Institute. It is a conservative think tank out of Boston, but it doesn't make it bad. It just, you know, it's just there. But it is a conservative think tank that I happen to like this version.
It's not crazy.
My students get it when they go to Johnson County, and you know, they realize they've got a nut for a professor when I pull this out and tell them to read it. We read the Constitution in my classes, cover to cover to start with, and I think it makes a difference. Look at the House of Representatives copied my class. What can I say?
I didn't read the whole thing. As an underemployed person in this economy, what's going on in Kansas to create jobs? I didn't hear the word jobs at all.
Yeah, you're referring to me as the underemployed person.
No, me. I'm the underemployed person.
I'm just kidding. So are we. Everybody talks about jobs, and that's critical. Creation of jobs. But how do you create jobs? You know, you've got everybody with different opinions. Some people say, make government a lot smaller and you'll create jobs. Well, maybe. But I have a concern. This is my concern. I think I said this last month. If we bring businesses here because of tax structure, and I support that. I support having a good, competitive tax structure in the state. If we bring businesses here and we give them tax exemptions for a long period of time, and then we expect that they're going to come and they're going to hire all kinds of people, and oh, by the way, we want them to go to those underemployed areas like our smaller communities where they don't have the workforce. You've got to have a workforce. You have to have workforce development. If you're bringing businesses into the state, they need to be contributing. And how are they contributing if they hire people in India to do the work? And that's a lot of these electronic things. Those are the things that I'm really concerned about, is that we think they're going to do great things for us. But if they don't bring along all those things like the job creations for people and hire people in Kansas, hire people here in our communities, what have we done really? We've given away the money. There again, I get on my thing about tax exemptions are one of the biggest problems we have that people don't want to talk about because everybody's got a sacred cow.
But that's one way. I mean, there are infrastructure investments, there are, future things that we need to be working on now, wireless across the state that would help those frontier towns be connected. I mean, I work from home, I could literally work anywhere. I just think that there seems to be a great opportunity in marrying energy with improvements in our environment, breathing the air, those kinds of things, with job creation. You're talking about workforce development. I don't see any investment or revenue put towards, training for jobs in the future, things that could be done here. I mean, I just think that there's a little bit of lack of creativity.
Well, there may be, and certainly there are people who know a lot more about that than I do as far as the training aspect. You got to get the universities and the not just universities, but the tech schools and various schools, and they have to be funded in order to function. But if you cut the funding so that they can't do that, but I will tell you, Johnson County Community College out here is an excellent college, and it expanded in its enrollment this past year 30%. Part of it was because of the economy. People couldn't go to the four-year institutions, so they stayed at home and went to Johnson County. But it's got some excellent training things, and there's public-private partnerships that are done. One of the first ones I recall was when we were adding and expanding to Johnson County Community College when I was on the city council. Burlington Northern came in and they put their whole project out there at the community college, and it's still going great guns now. We have some great nursing programs that are going on at Johnson County Community College. There are some really good things that are there.
The Senate Committee on Education did hear some bills that were going through on the expansion of technologies within the higher education realm and building out some of those communication grids and working towards training and building new programs that our workforce could utilize in order to build out those communication grids. So there are some creative bills that are coming through that are working toward just that thing.
Good to hear. Thank you. How about a bill to hold these businesses that have exemptions accountable? I mean, we have all these requirements for schools to account for how they're using their dollars, but we're giving these tax exemptions, and then we're not making these businesses prove that they've created jobs or that they're keeping jobs here in our state. I mean, has anyone ever thought about perhaps introducing a bill to hold them accountable?
Not a bill that I've heard about, but there is discussion about that. And there's also, those of you that talk about education, there's another thing that I've heard discussed more lately, is students that get scholarships and various things, and then they're here for a little while and then they leave, especially athletic scholarships. I have a problem with these athletics where you get people, we pay them a huge amount of athletic scholarship and they stay a couple of years and then they go into the pro draft and they leave, and we've given them all kinds of breaks at the college. I'm not so sure if they're going out and making the kind of dollars they're making when they go out, that we shouldn't ask them to repay their scholarships back into the education fund, have earmarked to go back into that if they're not going to get a degree from our colleges and tech schools or wherever they're going. I really think that that's something we ought to think about, because I think they're there. We've gotten away from why people go to college anymore sometimes. I think especially the athletics.
When tax exemptions are given to business to come into the state, is there any contract or agreement made between the state and the business?
I think it might be the definition of contract. If they get the exemption, but I don't think there's anything that they have to pay back.
Well, no, but is there an assurance that they're going to create 50 jobs in the
That has been
first 2
discussed. I've heard that discussed. Now, it's not in any kind of bill format, but there are people in the legislature who talk about those things. When we do find time in between meetings and whatnot, we do talk about those kind of things.
Isn't there a clawback provision in some of those incentives, which does
Yes.
make it possible to get
But that's a
exempt-
negotiation, and we probably have to be negotiating more clawbacks and see what that does.
Yeah.
Tim, I was just going to mention in Overland Park, that we had a situation where, I want to say it was Capital One. Anyway, we had given some tax incentives, which might have been from a state program, I don't know. But it included a provision that required that they employ so many people, and they failed to do that. And as a result of that, they had to pay those taxes back. And I think we ultimately ended up coming up with some sort of compromise. But I know that, so I'm thinking that other cities do the same thing, but in Overland Park we do, and depending on the circumstances, we'll include provisions that require that they have to hire so many people in order for them to be qualified for the tax abatements. I would imagine other cities do the same thing. That may be a local thing as opposed to the state controlling that.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I want to go back to the healthcare freedom amendment, and my hope would be that it would be passed out of committee for the Senate and be allowed to be on the ballot so that people all across the state can use their.
I think it's a critical enough issue, and it is the reason, I think, why a lot of people elected different people this last year, and I think it'll get through. I don't think nobody is going to want to not address the healthcare issue. It's just knowing what the proper solution would be is, the end result is the issue. Nobody knows what's really, they know what they don't like. They don't like the Obama plan. But on the other hand, and I say they, some people do. But
A lot of people love it. A majority.
I don't know that the majority does.
It does.
And I think that might be proven out in an election. But not everybody hates it. And there are people out there that are saying that they do. And the proponents of the bill are those who are opposed to the Obama plan. Now, do I think that ought to come out? It's in my committee. I'm going to put it before a vote. We're going to have a hearing on it, and we'll see what the committee says. If I were to count noses in my committee right now, I think it comes out.
I just don't understand why any given legislative body would not allow the voice of the people, by having the amendment on the ballot. And my understanding is the amendment doesn't amend Obamacare or anything like that. I mean, it just takes it back to square one in D.C. as far as people in Kansas are concerned.
Well, as far as people in Kansas are concerned.
Yeah, but there's other states that are
There are, that's right.
pursuing the same.
Now, that gets into a debate that, and you raise, I think, a really good point, but there is a major debate in this country between what I call the populist movement and the representative government side of things. And that's a big issue we talk about in our classes in government in college. Populist means, there are people out there who would like everything that relates to money to be on the ballot. If it relates to money, I want it on the ballot so I can vote on it. That's just a money issue. There are lots of people who would like to vote on everything. We can't do that. But we do have representative government, and that is we elect people to go and represent us. If we don't like what they do, you vote for somebody else. So, in that kind of an issue, I think there are a lot of people now that want that healthcare issue on the ballot. But there are other issues that they would like to have on the ballot as well. I think this is just one, and there are others that will pop up. And the more you get like that, the more you're going to get an enthusiastic, oh, okay, we voted on that, okay, vote on my issue. I think this one will come out. And I think healthcare is a huge issue that people are really concerned about. Quite honestly, I think that's why we elected a whole new group of people this last year, was because of Obama's healthcare plan. And that may be an oversimplification, but I think that's what happened.
It had to do with money, not healthcare.
Well,
And the economy.
I will tell you that the people that I've talked to talk about, the economy, but they talk about what happened in terms of forcing them to have a health care plan.
You have to have car insurance.
Well, yeah, I'm not arguing the issue. I'm saying this is what people are telling me. I heard a lot of people that were so angry about the health care mandate that they voted against incumbents. We lost a lot of incumbents across the state because of that plan. We lost a lot of people too because people were so upset about losing jobs, but by far, I heard far more across the state, legislators that I've talked to, it was about the health care issue. And you know, we go back and forth, and I'll say this. We have got to make a change in this country or we are in real trouble. And the change we have to do is we've got to get back to the middle. What we are doing is we are electing all kinds of things. We are making decisions based upon radical extremes on each end. In my opinion, again, this is Tim Owens, we got Obama because we had George Bush. We got to change this last time because of the Obama health care plan and some of the other plans he was making. And people swing back to the radical opposite. It's time that we got back to the middle and we were able to see that there are compromises that can be made because the American government is about compromise. And that's where I am. I'm an avowed centrist. I don't make any apologies for it. I just am tired of it being on the extremes on both ends because I think it's very detrimental to our government. So,
One thing that's interesting, though, about the health care plan is most people can't tell you why they don't like it except for the mandate, because there were so many untruths told about it. And then people who decide not to have health insurance, you know, we're cutting Medicaid, it's terribly, you can't get it. Those people will still get health care. They'll go to the emergency room, and you and I will pay for it. It's just craziness.
no, I understand. You know, I understand the argument. I have not read the 4,000 pages.
I haven't either, and neither have they.
That's my whole point. We were at the same meeting last week, listening to the same thing. And people, because of the just unbelievable amount of documents involved with this whole healthcare thing, is just incredible. And what did make the final cut and what didn't. I am one of those rare individuals who benefited from this because I had a pre-existing condition that I have been paying on for a long time. That is finally rescinded. So even though the school district froze my salary, it was almost like getting a pay cut because they were now covering my health care insurance. I was paying over $12,000 a year for just me. We're not talking to 5 kids.
There are people that are paying a horrendous amount.
So it's one of those things, some people just haven't seen the benefit of it, and it's kind of like, I'm so old, I remember when Medicare came out. And the thing that I laughed about in this last year was keep government out of Medicare. I thought, well, it's a government program. So, you know, so I mean, that's how, and I remember people thought that was going to be awful too. So it's one of those things that got an awful lot of press from people who don't like it because they don't want to pay for it. But
there is so much
misinformation.
Right.
There's a lot of floating out there that I'm just not sure that people have enough information to make decisions.
But you know what? If you think about it, just about everything falls in that category. People that talk about the DUI commission, this is the DUI bill. One bill. Now, that's not 4,000 pages long, but it's 130, 140 pages long. There's so little time that we allocate to people having to be able to understand. And that gets back to the point about electing, letting the people have a say. The reason you have people that are elected to go and study these things is because most people do not have the time to study the real issues, and you don't know all about the inside parts of it. Everybody.
Part of the anger is because they didn't study the bill before it passed. And I think if you could get people on both sides of the healthcare issue together and get down to root issues, I think we would both want the same thing. We would want affordable insurance for everyone to be covered, to get their needs met, you know, in the right way. It's just that this particular bill that came out of D.C. is not the right vehicle. And so, you know, when it comes to an amendment on the ballot for the people to have their say, state, I think that's a good thing.
And I think probably we're going to see that now. It takes 2/3 vote for a constitutional amendment. But I think it's there. If it's not there, it'll be on the Senate side where it isn't, because they need 27 votes out of 40.
Yeah, well,
Thank you. Well, and the general note is that things are so politicized, like you're talking about swinging from one point to another. And I'm concerned about the way Chris Taubach is politicizing his office, which really should be it's the Secretary of State is supposed to enroll businesses, register businesses and things like that. And he's taking on a completely different role. And I will just give you an example of my husband, who is an architect. He's registered in over a dozen states. He's an American citizen, has a passport, or has a passport now because he tried to get registered in Arizona. And they would not accept the fact that he had all these credentials in other states. He had to go and get a passport in order to do business in Arizona. And I'm really concerned that that's not good for business. I mean, everybody ran on lowering taxes and bringing business to Kansas, but this is the exact opposite. What he's doing, I think, is anti-business. And it's just another example of how politicized our decision-making got. People were political about his issue, but they didn't vote for him to be a good Secretary of State.
It's probably more political now that I've seen it for a long time, but it's just a lot of very difficult issues, and there's a lot of anger and hate, and that really bothers me too.
Yeah.
But, Dean?
well, I just wanted to mention, I think it's worth noting that regardless of what the people of Kansas say they want to have as a Kansas constitutional amendment, if it is in conflict with the U.S. Constitution, in other words, the Supremacy Clause would negate whatever the people of Kansas vote on. So it's ultimately going to be decided probably by the Supreme Court of the United States. And regardless of how we vote in Kansas on a constitutional amendment, if it's unconstitutional from the U.S. Constitution, it won't be in effect.
Well, that's true, but the thing, like Lenny back here said, people want a voice. They want to be heard about an issue. One way to do that is through a ballot. They can say what they want. Now, you're right, the Supremacy Clause can come into effect. Now, we went through this whole argument and debate about the marriage amendment that never went to the federal government. It never got through as far as the states were wanting it to, and so what we have is we have state amendments, and there's full faith and credit issues that were at hand there. But, I think people are frustrated because they don't have a voice, or they don't feel like they have a voice. They want to have a voice. They should have a voice through their elected officials, but they don't always feel like they've got that. I think one of the purposes in me reading you all these bills that I did today was to share with you the volume of issues that just one committee deals with. And if I do 3 of those in an hour,
Wow.
15, 20 minutes where you get people that want to come and talk about them, and I give them 2 or 3 minutes to be able to talk, and they get frustrated sometimes because they didn't get to say everything they wanted to, or they didn't get to repeat you should have heard the one about the grandparent rights, and the people that wanted to come in and tell their case. They wanted to recite their case and how mad they were at the judge, and all of that sort of thing. You can't do that in 2 or 3 minutes. So there's a lot of frustration, and people just want to be heard. And frankly, although I did a lot of talking, that's one of the reasons we have these forums. And it's I'm disappointed that my colleagues from the House have chosen not to come.
And it was a choice.
Now, I will tell you that after the last time, I think they thought that I just, ramrodded over them, and they didn't like that. And the other thing I think is kind of interesting is that they have had their own forums.
But where have they had?
Where did they have their forum? They had it at the Republican headquarters.
No, I went to one last week for the Spanish ones.
Shawnee Mission West, that's right, what was it, Shawnee Mission West?
Where was that? What was the public notification on that?
Well, it was supposed to be through the Johnson County Republican Party website. but
How did we?
Why would a Democrat go
You know, I don't know, that's not my.
No, it's not.
Right.
But it was hard to find.
You're
out.
right,
I
you're
don't
right.
know that this one was well publicized.
Well, I
Well, the
understand
Star
that
had the wrong date for this one.
they put the wrong date on it, we got some phone calls at Topeka about it.
But they need to be in the Sun and the Star.
They do.
We did put them out, Martha does it.
Yeah, you can't get them to run it.
You can, they're very limited on what they will do, we do the best we can, I don't know how else to get them out to people.
The pitch has a great events page.
Well, you can always go to Senator Owens' legislative, do we post it on your legislative site?
I don't know, because I depend on you all to.
Do you? Well, we're having some computer issues in a new program.
Oh, my goodness. That's going to take a whole forum to talk about.
That's a good point, though, that how do we get the word out so that people know about it?
Well, it's great you had your card here today, and now people can go to the website and keep track that way. I mean, we have that as a personal
But-
responsibility too.
Well, I really do, I want mine to be open to everybody. I represent every person in the 8th District as your senator, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent. The 8th District is made up of, this is the constituency of the 8th District, 48% Republican, 25% Democrat, the rest are Independent except for 1%.
Other.
No, not vegetarian, what is it?
Libertarian.
Libertarian. And so they are, that is the makeup. But once we're elected, we are elected for everybody in the district, in my opinion. We are not just party side. Because if I only represented the people who are in my party, that'd be 48%. That's a minority of my district. And I refuse to do that. So, like I said, I'm a centrist. I look at the issues and I'm not just going to be totally party oriented, but
Senator, would you be interested in having everybody who wants to leave your name and email address, and then I'll send out an email every time there's a public forum to everybody who wants to sign up? Good idea.
good Lord loves a volunteer. I think people have been doing that. We do have some on there. I confess I'm an old dog learning new tricks, and I'm not learning very well as far as electronics. But that's why I surround myself with really
But having a
Do
meeting.
you have another one scheduled after this one?
March 26th.
March 26th, okay.
Having a forum scheduled at the Republican headquarters is a very deliberate way to exclude Democrats and Independents, even if it is in the paper.
Will it be here?
It'll be here. Yeah, they're always here. I had 4 of them last year, and this is the 3rd one I think I've had since December. And I get a lot from it. I really do. I learn a lot from you all, even though I do a lot of talking. I know that. But I also feel like I need to tell you what's going on and give you an idea about what we're dealing with because of the volume. And if you have special issues, my card's there. You can get a hold of me. I'm pretty accessible, even though my days are crazy. And you can ask Martha and Vicki, about what those days are like.
Do you have a preference as to when a constituent should call you, as far as time?
As far as what?
Time availability, a preference as to when a constituent should try to have a discussion with you via the phone?
Call me on the phone. You're more apt to catch me on the phone at night at my house because I go back and forth every day.
I got him at 9:30 one night when he was on the city council.
Now I will tell you one time when I was in my law office, I had a really intense case and I was at my law office at 2 o'clock in the morning and the phone rang. Well, I thought the only person who would be crazy enough to call me at 2 o'clock in the morning might be my wife if she was still awake, and so I thought I'd better answer it. So I answered it and it was a client. And I said, "Why would you think I would be here?" They said, "Well, you are." But I really mean that. As far as telephone, another way is I do eventually catch up on my emails emails. I have a ton of emails. And I'm going to be spending about half of my weekend this weekend. My wife's out of town, so it's me and the cats. So I'll be spending a bunch of my time catching up on emails. So I do look at those. My delete button has the words erased off of it because I have so much junk mail that comes in. But I do try to do that. So that's another way.
I do have to say that if you will call and leave a message, you can usually have a couple of minutes somewhere in the day that you can call back.
Right, and that's you can call Topeka, and Jana is my secretary, and she does real good about getting me the messages, and I do take a little bit of time, usually after the session, which is 2:30 to 3:30, 4 o'clock usually, so that last hour or so of the day is a time when I can usually get phone calls returned. I try to do that.
Tim, I've been getting some spam on my email, including prostitution stuff and financial scam. Is there some place that we should be sending that?
I wish there was, but I don't know how you get rid of that stuff.
Well, I could probably find out what the email sender name was, but I'd like to be able to send that to some place where it's Attorney General, District Attorney, or whoever it is that could.
Now, part of the problem, Bob, is a lot of that comes from offshore, out of the country. I'll tell you what I wish I could do. I'm old military, and there's this, thing about snipers and whatnot. If you've got their beam, if we had a way to send back something along the beam and destroy their computer, I'd love to do that. But other than that, I don't know what we do. But I would say just report it when you get it in. Report it to the Attorney General's office, and if they get another.
I think the Attorney General's office is the proper place.
Yes.
I don't know of any other place that's comprehensive enough to do that.
Throw in abortion. Throw in an abortion idea on the email and those.
Their ability to do something is so limited, so don't have high expectations that they're actually going to be able to help you because of where the emails come from.
One of the things, don't ever respond to any of them.
Oh, of course not.
If you do, you're on everybody's list.
Are you hitting junk when you highlight them? Do you hit your junk thing?
Yes.
And so they tag it every time. Do you have a filter on it?
Yeah.
I'm reminded we have 5 minutes to be out of the room because we rent this room, but yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to, we had several conversations about the Chummission School District, and they became more efficient as of last time. They are not replacing a retired associate superintendent that is retiring, and so I want you to.
Yeah, they are replacing.
They're just calling it something else.
They are, but they are eliminating that salary. So,
But we were supposed to eliminate a salary in that building as well, so.
So, I mean, they have removed, for 1 year, or at least they announced it for a year, that they will not replace that.
I think everybody's really trying, and sometimes forced effort, but I think they're trying. It's just that the perception is there's a lot more there than there is. So we'll keep trying. But I want to thank all of you for taking your time to be here and express yourselves. I apologize again if I did too much talking and not enough listening, but I really do appreciate you. And please come back on the 26th of March and bring your friends and people that have questions, and we'll try. I'm going to talk to my other colleagues in the House and see if they'll join us again next time. Because I think this is really good. We get a good cross section of the 8th Senate districts, and I appreciate it all a lot.